which stands for Bitcoin Civilisation 2. Okay, so before we can talk about CivKit, we're going to give you like an intro to Lightning Network and then Nostra, because a lot of what we've done there kind of builds on those two parallels. So who here knows what Lightning is? Who here runs a Lightning node? Who here has opened a Lightning channel? Okay, not bad.
Yeah, I mean, what's your level of knowledge about Lightning? Like, have you opened like a channel manually or with any kind of tooling, or like, okay, or like, let's start first maybe by Bitcoin transactions. So what is a payment channel? A payment channel is a set of pre-signed transactions between two or more counterparties, and those pre-signed transactions are going to represent a balance between the counterparties. So let's say I'm going to open a channel with Nick. What I'm going to do, we do have 1 Bitcoin. We put this 1 Bitcoin in the 2 of 2 multisig. And based on this 2 of 2 multisig, we're going to sign a set of transactions. And each new set of transactions is going to represent a new state of the payment channel. And like, let's say I buy, I don't know, a computer to Nick. I send 0. Bitcoin to Nick. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to sign a new transaction which represents 0. Bitcoin in favor of Nick and 0.9 Bitcoin in my favor. And then like Nick might buy me or might send me payments, and we might rebalance the chain more in my favor. You do this if Nick goes offline. At any time I can broadcast this set of pre-signed transactions. It confirms on chains. I do have the Bitcoin on chains. Or what we might do, we might force close the chain in a cooperative way, in the sense of we use this 2 of 2 multisig, we sign transactions, and we broadcast on chain. That's basic payment channel. You might have more subtleties. And there is one last important thing is what if Nick's try to cheat me, because I don't trust Nick. So like Nick broadcasts in all states, what I might be able to do is use the revocation secrets to generate a punishment transaction, and based on these punishment transactions, takes all the chains, all the funds of the channel. That's basic payment channel technology.
Yeah. Everyone good with that? Everyone got good understanding?
Yeah, let's do it in a Socratic way. If you do have any questions at any moment, just raise your hand and like ask questions.
Okay, so who here knows what Nostra is? Okay, anyone use Nostra? Okay, so I have actually used Nostra, so, but it's very simple. I mean, the hardest thing about Nostra is actually knowing what it stands for. I only found that out this week. It's notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. As we say in Bitcoin, we have no CEO or no marketing department. But it was invented by a guy called Fiat Jeff. That's all we know about it. I actually have spoken to him on the phone a couple of times. He is real. He's a prolific Bitcoin application developer. And I guess when you want to understand Nostra, there's two concepts. You basically want to understand, it's a bunch of cryptographic key pairs. So think of a server and a client. So you guys all know how to sign Bitcoin transactions. You have a Bitcoin address. That's kind of like your send to. You take a transaction, you sign it with your private key, you send it, broadcast it to the network, and it ends up at that Bitcoin address. In Nostra, you have this concept of a client, and all it does is assigns a message, a piece of content with the private key, and that generates a signature which can be validated against that public key. And as a client, if I wanted to send that message to, say, Antoine in the Nostra world would be a relay. All he does is accepts that address, validates that it comes from me, and he forwards it. He can relay it to other users. And that's all it is. And the initial use case was kind of like a replacement for Twitter. So you can imagine, I want to go to Nostra's, what's his name, Antoine's relay, because he won't censor my politically incorrect posts. I sign them, send them to him, he broadcasts, he relays it on his local website. And yeah, and what happened this year is you had a big donation, I think, from Jack Dorsey to...
Yeah, and you had like a lot of people like up on NOSTR starting to use it. I think Edward Snowden, a bunch of other people. Most interesting thing is like NOSTR has been developed by people from the Bitcoin community, and they're using the same set of cryptography, notably like for the cryptographic key pairs, they're just using the Schnorr standard, which has been like, Schnorr has become active in Bitcoin in 2021. End of 2021 as a software. So it just a huge simplifications like in terms of software engineering, sense of we share the same abstraction, the same cryptographic abstractions.
Yeah, the key thing, there's no real relationship with Bitcoin. I mean, it's built by Bitcoiners, but it could be used in theory by any other blockchain. Which I know Coinscrum, you like that. But I mean, there's no true relationship. So, and other use cases are starting to appear. One of them, people are looking to replace email, do messaging, and
new GitHub, decentralized GitHub versions, like websites or like storage management.
Dating apps, I saw the other day.
Yeah, dating apps
is a big one.
Decentralized AI.
Yeah, people are looking to do little ChatGPT. There's a project that I got involved with where they're doing like little private ChatGPT type things behind the NOSTR relay. And basically you can do anything because the paradigm's so simple. There isn't a protocol per se, but there are specifications. They're called NIPs, NOSTR Improvement Protocol, and that follows on from the Bitcoin standard of BIPs, Bitcoin Improvement Protocol.
And what's the main purpose of this?
Sorry?
What's its main objective?
A decentralized Twitter. A decentralized version of Twitter.
Just that, yeah.
Yeah, which is just like relay message and broadcast message and receive
So
message.
you could use it as a payment system.
What do you mean by using it as a
Well,
payment
let's talk about Twitter being used as a payment system. I don't know.
Sure, but
But it's more of a broadcast
More
mechanism.
broadcast.
Yeah, so I mean, this goes into what we were trying to do at CivKit. Some people, and we weren't the first at CivKit, looked at basically doing decentralized marketplaces. So you can imagine if you have an order, you want to broadcast that to as many people as possible, but then if someone wants to pay, they want to use Lightning, which is more point to point. But yeah, anything you can think like that, that's the use cases. I mean, it's very simple, and I think it's there's been quite a lot of attempts to do social media stuff on other blockchains. They issue a token. NOSTR in a few months has kind of got a lot more momentum, and it's very simple. And there are challenges to it. It doesn't solve what happens if a relay becomes too big, what happens if it's a very simple paradigm using public key cryptography to sign messages and relay. And that's why it's growing, because you don't really need to be an expert on it. So that sorry.
So I've got probably a good time to answer this question actually, and it's from someone else, and they said, is it possible to run a NOSTR relay on your Lightning node, and what are the risks to doing so, considering relays could potentially be supporting illegal content?
So you mean running your NOSTR relay on the same infrastructure than your Lightning node?
Yeah.
And like the legal risk for your Lightning node, you mean?
Yeah, I guess so. If someone's...
Yeah, but it's just a liability as a NOSTR relay. It seems that Tor, are you familiar with Tor relay and
yep.
Tor node? Yeah, it's the same type of liability, I think.
Yeah, so that brings us on to CivKit. So
and one thing which is super interesting about NOSTR is like migration costs from a NOSTR relay to another one, in the sense of if my NOSTR relay start to censor me or start to deny to publish my post, well, I don't care. I can just like move to another NOSTR relay, and my subscribers will be able to identify me based on my key. Keeping like migration cost low.
So there's no censorship potentially there.
Yeah, and it's designed with censorship resistance in mind, NOSTR.
So each NOSTR node would decide what it wanted to censor. It would have its own censorship.
Its own policy.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, and there is a hard, it's hard boundary between like, is that spam prevention or censorship? In the sense of, if you're doing like a NOSTR relay based on the weather in London, you don't care about the weather in New York. So you're going to censor New York weather past, right? So it just means like, I guess each NOSTR relay is going to count its own policy about what do you accept and what do you reject, this type of message.
And there's nothing stopping the NOSTR relay acting blinded, like you can just take packets and not be able to see them as well. And that's something we're looking at. When you do things like order books, you want to prevent MEV attacks. You don't necessarily want to see the way orders are coming in. You don't want to be able to rearrange them. So, and you're seeing things like that. I think the biggest issue with NOSTR is really that it's based on a private key. And if you lose your private key, and there are people looking at doing key rotations. There's a few proposals, but that's probably the trickiest thing people are finding it from a user point of view.
And people have been working also on doing onion routing across relay, NOSTR relay. In the sense of I have NOSTR relay 1, NOSTR relay 2, NOSTR relay 3. I send my blinded or my onion encrypted packets to Nostr Relay 1, Nostr Relay 2, and it's only like deciphered by the Nostr Relay 3 and announced to other clients. But it's not working yet. It's what people have been working on.
Yeah, so that brings us on to, I think this year we saw the maturation of Nostra and also Lightning, that we thought we'd give it a go to build a decentralized marketplace. So we basically, the white paper was, I think, published about 6 weeks ago. Did anyone read it here?
I skimmed it.
No, it's an in-depth. I mean, we weren't the first to try and do this, but I think the history of why we're doing it, we tried to tackle some issues to be able to do one at scale. So the team was Antoine. Now he's not a dog, but he is anonymous. So
I'm another dog.
but so if you feel lucky, not many people get to see him face to face. But yeah, we had Antoine here, who's done a lot of work on LDK, on Lightning. Myself, I work for a company called CommerceBlock. We build a lot of Bitcoin infrastructure. And Ray's the guy that, I don't know, do you guys know who Paxful is, Ray Yousef? So he's at one point, were probably, I'd say, the biggest peer-to-peer platform. And you can Google, Paxful shut down for some store reasons. You can Google it. Some of the stories are quite funny, but ultimately they did shut down. And I knew it was going to shut down about 6 months ago. I was bouncing ideas with Antoine, and we decided to maybe this was the time to try and do something. So we released a white paper. Didn't expect anyone to read it, but actually went bigger than what we expected. And there is code being built. This is not just an idea. There's one developer working, yours truly, but we plan to have 3 by the end of the year, and we got lots of contributions. But the reason why this existed is, peer-to-peer has been around since the early days of Bitcoin. I mean, any of you guys ever used local Bitcoin?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a good chance if you were buying Bitcoin in 2012, 2013, your only option was local Bitcoins.
Yes.
And that was it. And over time, there were more and more KYC regulation requirements. They were asking you more questions. It was getting harder and harder till that thing kind of became unusable and then shut down. Paxful took a lot of the volume of local Bitcoin, but their original story is what is page in New York, which you can read about, funny stories there. But ultimately, they found places in the gift card market. So people would go on there with their Amazon gift cards, exchange them, and then when local Bitcoin was kind of shut down, they became for a little while the leader in the peer-to-peer. But I'm not going to go into the whole history of Paxful, but over time, it just wasn't working. Ray, he did a lot of work in Africa. I think it's called Built with Bitcoins. He set up a foundation which I think created 13 schools in Africa, and he was able to get into those communities and create what he says are arbitrage corridors. So it's very hard in Africa for a guy in Nigeria to trade in Ghana. That's the use case he normally uses. By creating Paxful, people were able to trade with each other peer-to-peer. Now the problem with Ray, he's an American. American compliance just was not working with Africa. And he was spending, $6 million a year to potentially do $2 million worth of volume. And eventually they decided to shut down. And that's the problem with centralized peer-to-peer. Compliance doesn't work. Even if you wanted to be clean and do KYC and AML, it still doesn't work. I could easily go and buy fake KYC AML data on the dark web and be a Paxful trader. So
you do have a hard issue about every country has its own identity system. There is no internet standard about identity and all that kind of thing. So it means every time you're going to do cross-country type of payments or type of interactions, you run into a lot of not only compliance issue, but am I going to trust the proof of the other guys, or on what basis are you sure I accept this cryptographic proof? It's unclear.
yeah, so. And we're not the first. There are still active peer-to-peer network systems in Bitcoin. You have BISC. You have RoboSats, which actually I'm quite a fan of. They're doing pretty well.
And you had experience before, who has heard about Open Bazaar, or okay, a few people.
But I think, how any of them can work at scale, we're not sure. So a lot of paper, which we'll go through in a bit, kind of deals with some of the problems of running one of these at scale, like reputation, DDoS, being spammed. And the technology framework we very much see as Nostra as the underlying, broadcasting information, broadcasting orders, and then using basically this Lightning for basically point-to-point payment and a reputation system.
So yeah, one of the hardest issues in designing peer-to-peer marketplaces, how do I find first the trades, how I find good trades, and how I find like good counterparties. In a sense of, okay, I might enter into a trade with someone, but if the guy tries to screw up or like try to cheat me, or like if someone can cheat into a trade and do this at scale with 1,000 people, like your marketplace is not going to work. So how do you design reputation in decentralized worlds? There is no Google of reputation like assigning a score to everyone. And what we aims to build, like, we think there is two paradigms we might build for peer-to-peer marketplace, and we aim to build and like have the two of them functional in one framework, which is one, I would say, web of trust base. And like, who is familiar with PGP here, or like who has ever used PGP? Okay, a few people. Like PGP, it's the idea, okay, I do sign like Nick key, and I say, hey, I trust Nick. You can do trade with Nick because I've done trade with Nick. And then Nick is going to do like trade with a bunch of you guys in the room, and he's going to sign your PGP keys for every successful trade. So there have been like few attempts during the past years about like the web of trust with decentralized identifier, which is like, let's say I might be able like to build like PGP-like signature of any kind of object, either an organization, either an object, either a name, either like locations, and like based on this like build chain of this. And there is also like this idea of verifiable credentials, where like you will try to have like social base identity being somewhat translated into the cryptographic world, where you say, hey, let's say the Estonian government is going to be like its own verifiable credential providers, and it's going to sign like cryptographic certificate that this guy is like this real, this owner of the certificate is this real guy in the social life. And that's more like web of trust. And web of trust somehow is great if you have a brand, if you're corporations, like you might say, hey, let's say I'm Walmart, I'm starting my own marketplace, and I'm going to bless people with whom I'm making trade by signing their own keys. That's one first paradigm for reputation. There is another one which is more like based on what the blockchain effort, which is like more web of states, in the sense of, we do have people who own UTXO, and UTXO, like if I take all your UTXO, I will have some kind of image of your economic life on the blockchain in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And if I take this subset of your UTXO, which is Lightning Channel, I know like all like the people with whom you do have like an economic relationship. And based on this, like I do have a graph of your economic life on the blockchain. And if I take the intersections of all people economic graph, I start to have like a view of the Bitcoin economy. And based on this, with time, we might be able to say, hey, if this guy has a lot of Lightning liquidity allocated towards his own nodes, you know that this guy has high economic weight in the network. Because you do assume that economic actors are rational and they're not going to waste their liquidity on someone. And you might like refine your score or your economic score based on other factors like UTXO age, or like the form of the topology of your graph, or mix this with web of trust in the sense of, if I do have Lightning channels open with people with a high real-world brands, I should have a higher score. So yeah, that's how we aim to decentralized applications working for CivKits. And it's based on the same ideas that you do have for like the internet and the way that the Google PageRank is working, in the sense of, if your website runs well in the HTTP world, it's because you have a lot of hyperlink pointing towards you, and that's the same idea for CivKit.
Okay, yeah, so it's more than an idea. We are looking in the next few months to do a few code drops. The first thing is we want to have a CivKit node. Now this is a Lightning node based on LDK, but there's going to be quite a lot of tweaks.
Yeah, I mean, main thing is like, we aim to bridge like both NOSTRs and Lightning communication infrastructure, in a sense of the Lightning network has its own like onion routing framework. And it's great if you want to send like private message across the world, because they are going to be relayed by the Lightning nodes. And we want to use like NOSTR more for doing the announcement part of the marketplace. In the sense of, my order book is the sum of all the onion message I receive, and then I can like announce them to like all my NOSTR clients. We aim to have like credentials working for this, in the sense of not adding a NOSTR not being DOS by dumb onion message or dumb offers. And we aim to have also like this order booklet being timestamped in some kind of Bitcoin notary protocol. Who has heard about the mainstays or the timestamp or mainstay? Yeah, cool. The great thing is like with time, like if I do a dump of all my order book message in the chain, instead of I do timestamp them, with time someone is able like to see the reputation of my boards and to see like if they're trustworthy or what types of trades I do engage in, like if I do engage in dollars trades, or if I host more Newark trades, or if I host more like Singapore versus dollars versus Bitcoin trades and all that kind of things.
And yeah, mainstay, it basically writes to the Bitcoin blockchain, but what it does, it builds a sparse Merkle tree, and it basically kind of validates a set of data against a transaction. So there won't be any ordinals type BRC20 drama. You could put 1 billion JPEGs on mainstay in one transaction and fine. And if you want to put JPEGs on there or ordinals, fine, we'll take it. But it's much more efficient. So and it's private as well. You don't see the data.
There is separation of the data and the metadata. And mainstay is just like about the metadata and type something.